Hi. Hi. It's Thursday, April 10th. Is it the 10th? Nope, it's the 9th. It's Thursday, April 9th. And that means it is activity time for grades 9 through 12. Today we're going to be talking about media literacy, and there is one thing that you can print off of Google Classroom. Looks like this. It's about 4 pages long. And if you can't print that off and follow along, that's totally fine. We're going to go through all of these definitions and we're going to talk about all the things that are on that paper. So if you can't print it, that's totally okay. As usual, I would love to hear your thoughts and comments. Please leave them below the video. If you're joining us live and you have any questions, please feel free to ask those at any time, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. As well, please subscribe to our channel. That way you don't miss any classes. So for the foreseeable future, since school is now closed until fall, at least here in Washington State, it may be different in other states. I will be teaching Monday through Thursday, and Thursdays will always be dedicated to learning for freshmen through seniors. Okay, so we're going to jump right into media literacy. What does that mean? Okay, well, it's not talking about the amount of time that you spend on media. It's talking about the amount of media that you ingest and the messages that you learn from all that, or that you are exposed to in all that media. So when I mean media, I don't just mean like social media, although that is a form. But we're talking about television, newspapers. Yes, some people still read newspapers, magazines, music. That's a huge media industry. Television, movies, and of course, like I said, social media. So these are all forms of media that you spend time with pretty much every day. The Kaiser Family Foundation, which is part of the Kaiser Permanente Medical Group, did a study, and they found that the average 8-year-old spends 8 hours a day ingesting media, and that's all the media that we just talked about. The average teenager spends 11 hours a day. So that's an awful lot of, video games. I almost forgot video games. That's also a kind of media. So that's an awful lot of media that we are ingesting, that we're spending time with. And today we're going to talk about the messages that we learn from that, the good, the bad, and the otherwise. So, for example, let's talk about television and movies for a little bit. On television and movies, do you see a lot of people that look like you? Do you see a lot of people whose families function like your family? Do you see people who have similar problems and issues that you do, or have similar aesthetics to you? If the answer is no, that's a really common answer. Most of us don't see people that look like us. A lot of us don't see people that act like us or dress like us. Some do. A majority of us don't. So what we see a lot of in TV and movies, especially in the scope of what I do, which is I work in a sexual assault resource center. So I'm a prevention specialist. So what we see a lot of is not only people that don't look like us, but people folks whose relationships are very different than ours and very different outcomes. So, for example, in movies, you see this a lot, this especially in romantic movies, this plot of the guy and the girl either don't like each other or they break up, and he just is kind of relentlessly pursuing her under the guise of it being romantic. Okay, so he just keeps sending her notes and keeps sending her flowers and keeps playing music and keeps showing up where she's at, until finally she realizes, oh, he's actually a really great guy. Maybe I should give him a chance. They get together, they live happily ever after. Unfortunately, what we see in the real world is, first of all, that's called stalking. He's not being plucky, or, oh, if I'm just implacable. And if somebody keeps showing up at your place and you've already said no, if they keep showing up at your work, they keep sending you notes, you've said no. And we talked about the word no before, that it's a complete sentence. If somebody asks you out or tries pressuring you for sex or nudes or whatever, and we're going to get into nudes and all that other stuff in a little bit. But if somebody is consistently pressuring you, and under the guise of it being romantic, sorry, I have to plug in my computer. It's about to die. What's happening in the real world a lot of times is he's stalking you or she's stalking you. It really doesn't matter the gender. It doesn't matter the orientation. If somebody is consistently coming after you and trying to get you to date them or have sex with them or whatever it is, and you've said no, that's stalking. And this whole they get together and live happily ever after. If somebody is that relentless in pursuing you, if somebody is stalking you, then what we see is when the dating starts, then they become incredibly controlling, deciding who you can and can't hang out with. Sorry, I'm working from my home office and I have 2 dogs that just realized that the mail person showed up and they feel the need to bark. Anyway, moving on. That happily ever after, they don't show you that the person is very controlling. They decide who you can and can't be with, and so on. So we also see a lot of violence, especially towards women. Excuse me. No, I don't have COVID-19. I have seasonal allergies. Okay. So we see an awful lot of violence in movies, TV, video games. Grand Theft Auto comes to mind. We see an awful lot of violence and objectification, particularly of women's bodies, but also of male bodies. And when you objectify someone, you take away their humanity. You make them an object. So that is a good segue to getting into magazines and advertising. As you've heard the term sex sells. So typically what we see a lot of women's bodies. We also see a lot of men's bodies. And they're this unattainable image, mainly because those people don't even look like that, especially in magazines. They're photoshopped. And when you make somebody's body a commodity for sale, when you make it an object for trade or sale, that takes away their humanity. You don't know anything about them, and you're set up to not care anything about them. Their body is an object that is made to be bought and sold. And this feeds into something that is called rape culture. So that's what this handout is. And we're going to go ahead and go through all of these. There's an awful lot of ground to cover, and I want to get right into it because I don't want to take your whole day. The sun is shining here in Western Washington. So, okay, rape culture. What is it? What is the definition? It's an environment in which rape is prevalent and in which sexual violence is normalized and excused in the media and popular culture. Rape culture is perpetuated through the use of misogynistic language, the objectification of women's bodies, and the glamorization of sexual violence, thereby creating a society that disregards women's rights and safety. It's not to say that it doesn't happen to men as well. It's much more prevalent. It happens much more often to women. So let me give you some examples. Victim blaming. She asked for it. How many times have we heard, well, what was she wearing? That's classic victim blaming, because it doesn't matter what someone is wearing. It doesn't matter if, what they're doing. If somebody does not consent to sexual activity, and we talked about consent last week, it doesn't matter. If somebody does not consent with an emphatic yes, not a pressured yes, not an intoxicated yes, but an emphatic and excited, yes, then it's not consent. There's a great art exhibit called What Were You Wearing? And campuses, it started with one, and college campuses all around the country are doing their own. And people donate the clothes or a good facsimile of the clothes that they were wearing when they were assaulted. Some people, when they report to police, their clothes are confiscated for evidentiary purposes. So maybe they found another blue t-shirt or something like that they were wearing. And it doesn't tell you, sometimes it tells you the person's age. It doesn't tell you the person's name, but there's a little plaque next to the objects of clothing that describe the assault. There's a little sundress from a 6-year-old. There's overalls. There's jeans and t-shirts. There's a red dress. There's all kinds of things. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what somebody's wearing. It doesn't matter. I really encourage you to look up that exhibit. It's really powerful. Trivializing sexual assault. Boys will be boys. Sexually explicit jokes. Tolerance of sexual harassment. Inflating false rape report statistics. So let's talk about that one for a minute. False reporting does happen, and it sucks, because it can really, really mess up somebody's life in the short term and sometimes in the long term. However, false reporting happens between about 2 and 6 to 8% of the time. It's on par with other false reportings of other felonies. So in the United States, for every 100 reported sexual assaults, 6 of those might go to prosecution. 2 of those might do some kind of time. Less than 1% of those statistically is a false report. So while it does happen, it doesn't happen nearly as much as a lot of people think it does. Publicly scrutinizing a victim's dress, mental state, motives, history. We talked about that a little bit. Gratuitous gendered violence in movies and television, video games as well. Defining manhood as dominant and sexually aggressive, like expecting all men to be really dominant, to be really aggressive, both in the business world and in athletic and sexually. This is a tough stereotype for men. Defining womanhood as submissive and sexually passive. Lots of pressure on men to score. And taking any feeling away, any emotion away from sex. It's just got to score with as many people as possible. Pressure on women not to appear cold or frigid. Assuming that only promiscuous women get raped. This is not true at all. Assuming that men don't get raped, or that only weak men get raped. Again, this is so not true. Refusing to take rape accusations seriously. If somebody tells you that they've been raped, believe them. The default is always believe them. Always believe them. Again, false reporting 2 to 6 to 8% of the time. Very, very smaller number than a lot of people believe. And teaching women to avoid getting raped versus teaching people not to rape. So victim blaming. One reason that people blame the victim, it's a very human reason, is we want to distance ourselves from things that are awful or tough. We want to distance ourselves from those. So we want to say things like, oh, that happened for this reason, or that happened for, she was wearing this, or she was drunk, or, that could never happen to me, because we don't want to believe that that sort of thing happens to us. Unfortunately, it's everywhere. It doesn't matter race, socioeconomics, education level, age, gender, sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. 1 in 4 females is sexually assaulted in her lifetime, and 1 in 6 males. That is a staggeringly high amount of people. 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males. So why is it dangerous? Why is victim blaming dangerous? So victim blaming attitudes marginalize the victim or survivor and make it harder to come forward and report the abuse. If you think you're going to be blamed for something that happened to you, you're probably not going to tell anybody. If the survivor knows that you or society blames him or her for the abuse, they're not going to feel comfortable talking to anyone. Victim blaming attitudes also reinforce what the abuser has been saying all along, that it's the victim's fault. I was so turned on, you made me do it, blah, blah, blah. Now, it is not the victim's fault or responsibility to fix the situation. It is the abuser's choice. Let me say that again. It is never, ever, 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 ever a rape survivor's fault that they were raped. The responsibility lies solely with the rapist. End of story. By engaging in victim blaming attitudes, society allows the abuser to perpetrate relationship abuse or sexual abuse while avoiding accountability for his or her actions. And I say his or her because women sexually assault people too. So what does victim blaming look like? So example, she must have provoked him into being abusive. We see this a lot in domestic violence as well. So at Beyond Survival, we are a sexual assault resource center. We are not a domestic violence resource center. There is one in Grace Harbor, and those people are amazing. Excuse me, I thought I was going to hiccup. But we do see a lot of crossover. So we work with them pretty often. Our advocates work with their advocates a lot because we see a lot of crossover. So the statement assumes that the victim is equally to blame for the abuse, when in reality, abuse is a conscious choice made by the abuser. Abusers have a choice in how they react to their partner's actions. Options besides abuse include walking away, talking in the moment, respectfully explaining why an action is frustrating, breaking up. You can break up. Additionally, abuse is not about individual actions that incite the abuser to hurt his or her partner, but rather about the abuser's feelings of entitlement to do whatever he or she wants to her partner or his partner. When friends and family remain neutral about the abuse and say that both people need to change, they're colluding with and supporting the abusive partner and making it less likely that the survivor will seek support. And again, we see this with men and women. Predominantly with women. Women are the highest number of people in abusive relationships, but they're not the only ones. Men can be in abusive relationships with other men and with women as well. So, for example, in movies or TV, we see the psycho girlfriend. Oh, isn't she funny, the psycho girlfriend? No, she's not. She's abusive. If someone is telling you, if you are a male and you have a girlfriend and she's like, you can't have any females on your Instagram or your Facebook or your TikTok. You can't be talking to any other females. I don't want you talking to anybody in school. You need to tell me where you are and who you're with and what you're doing. That's controlling and abusive in the same way that if a man did it to a woman, it's controlling and abusive. If she hits you, gentlemen, that's abusive. That's abuse. Do not take that from anyone. No one has the right to put their hands on you. No one. So how can men and women combat rape culture and victim blaming? Avoid using language that objectifies or degrades women or anyone. Don't objectify or degrade anyone. Speak out if you hear someone else making an offensive joke or trivializing rape. I have a great sense of humor, and I have kind of a weird, dark sense of humor, but I am utterly humorless about rape because it's not funny. If a friend says they've been raped, take your friend seriously and be supportive. Ways that you can be supportive, I believe you. Those 3 words are so powerful for a survivor. I believe you. What can I do to help you? Don't ask a ton of questions. When someone first discloses to you, it's in our nature. We want to know, Oh my gosh, who, how, what, where, why? We want to know all of those things. It's in our nature. We're curious people. You have to kind of fight that human nature and just be there for your friend. Just be there. That's all you have to do. Think critically about the media's messages about women, men, relationships, violence. Be respectful of others' physical space, even in casual situations. That goes back to last week's talk about consent. Let survivors know it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Hold abusers accountable for their actions. Do not let them make excuses like blaming the victim or alcohol or drugs for their behavior. Always communicate with sexual partners and do not assume consent. Define your own manhood or womanhood. Don't let stereotypes shape your actions. Define your own binary. That's up to you. It's up to you to decide what kind of person you want to be. If you are a female and you like to do traditionally male things, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a thing. Most things are not boy things or girl things or boy toys or girl toys. They're just toys or things. It's what you do with it that counts. So you get to define who you are. Whatever your best, healthiest you is, that's what I want for you. I had a kid who was like, wait a minute, but I want to be a buff dude. I want to be a big dude. I want to be really athletic. I'm like, that's awesome. Then do that. Then do that, because that's fantastic. And I want that for you. If that's your best, healthiest you, if you want to run 5Ks on holidays instead of eating potatoes like most other people, do it. Do it. I will be there cheering you on. Be who you want. And be an active bystander. So we will talk a little bit more probably next week about bystander intervention, but a bystander is basically somebody who witnesses an event and isn't necessarily part of the event. An upstander is somebody who does something about it. All right, so we're going to keep going. Dating and domestic violence facts. Fact, regardless of their actions, no one deserves to be physically, verbally, or sexually abused. In fact, putting the blame for violence on the victim is a way to manipulate the victim and other people. Batterers will tell them, you made me mad, you made me jealous, or will try to shift the burden by saying, everyone acts like that. Most victims try to placate and please their abusive partners in order to de-escalate the violence. The batterer chooses to abuse and bears full responsibility for the violence. Fact, many victims love their partners despite the abuse, blame themselves, or feel as if they have no support system or resources outside of the relationship, and so they feel as if they can't leave. Furthermore, the period immediately after leaving an abusive relationship is extremely dangerous. There's a lot of information in that fact. We can talk about that more. You can always ask questions, leave comments. But again, people wonder, well, why didn't they get out? We're talking usually about long-term abuse. And remember that abusers don't just groom victims, they groom allies. And a lot of abusers isolate their victims, especially in long-term relationships, and get them believing that nobody's going to believe them. Nobody's going to help them, and that nobody loves them the way that the abuser loves them, which is not true. Fact, jealousy and possessiveness are signs that the person sees you as a possession. They are one of the most common early warning signs of abuse. Jealousy and possessiveness. Yeah. Abuse can come in many forms, such as sexual, physical, verbal, and emotional. One that's not on here is financial. That happens a lot as well. When a person in a relationship repeatedly scares, hurts, or puts down the other person, it is abuse. Harassment, intimidation, forced or coerced isolation from friends and family, from having an independent social life, humiliation, threats or harm, of threats to harm you, your family, or pets, or threats of suicide if you leave, violating your privacy, limiting your independence and personal choices. These are all examples of abuse. Fact: while the majority of victims of domestic violence are women, men may also be victims of relationship violence. Men face many of the same barriers as women that prevent them from reporting abuse, but also face a different kind of stigma, since many do not believe that men can be victims of dating or domestic violence. When you're watching TV, if you see a man hit a woman, you're angered and sometimes shocked. If you see a woman hit a man, you typically laugh because it's usually in some kind of comedic setting, but it's not funny. It's abuse. And just like men underreport rape, men also woefully underreport domestic violence. Fact: the majority of men and young men in our community and all communities are not violent. The use of violence is a choice. Men who use violence in their relationships choose where and when they are violent. The large majority of offenders who assault their partners control their violence with others, such as friends or work colleagues. There is no perceived right, where there is no perceived right to dominate and control. So, majority of men are not abusive. Stating that all men are violent places the blame for the violence elsewhere and prevents the perpetrator from being responsible for his violence. The majority of men and women want and can be allies to help in the fight against this kind of violence. Fact: as many as 1/3 of all high school and college age young people experience violence in an intimate or dating relationship. Physical abuse is as common among high school and college age couples as it is among married couples. Sexual assault facts. Fact: men, women, and children of all ages, races, religions, and economic classes can be and have been victims of sexual assault. Sexual assaults happen in rural areas, small towns, and large cities. It is estimated that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted by the age of 18. This says 1 in 3. It's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 girls. It's still a staggering amount. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, a rape or attempted rape occurs every 5 minutes in the United States. So let's see, we've been doing this 25 minutes. That's 5 rapes or attempted rapes that happened in the time that we've been talking. Fact: sexual assault is never the victim's fault. Sexual assault is a violent attack on an individual, not a spontaneous crime of passion. For a victim, it's a humiliating and degrading act. No one asks for or deserves this type of attack. Most sexual assaults are committed by someone the victim knows. Studies show that approximately 80 to 90% of women reporting sexual assaults knew their assailant. A sexual assault can happen anywhere and at any time. The majority of assaults occur in places ordinarily thought to be safe, such as homes, cars, and offices. Reported sexual assaults are true with very few exceptions. Again, it's about 2 to 6% are false. This is the same rate of false reporting as other major crimes or felonies. Fact: men can be and are sexually assaulted. Current statistics indicate that 1 in 6 men are sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Sexual assault of men is thought to be greatly underreported. Again, there's a lot of reasons for that, and there's a lot of myths around. Men think, "Oh, that it makes me weak. Men don't get raped. How could I have been a victim? Does this make me gay?" No, it doesn't. All it makes you is the victim of a crime. That is all. It makes you the victim of a crime. Almost all sexual assaults occur between members of the same race. Interracial rape is not common, but it does occur. This fact is on here because of long-standing systemic racism that we won't go into here, but this long-standing, like, Black men are more violent than white men, which is just not true. Sexual assault is motivated by hostility, power, and control. Sexual assaults are not motivated necessarily by sexual desire. So, unlike animals, we are animals, but humans are capable of controlling how they choose to act or express sexual urges. Sexual offenders come from all educational, occupational, racial, and cultural backgrounds. There are no ordinary or normal individuals who sexually assault victims to assert power and control over them and inflict violence, humiliation, and degradation. It'd be great if people had like who they are tattooed on their foreheads, like "I'm nice" or "I sexually assault people," because then you would know to stay away from them. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. Um, Anytime someone is forced to have sex against their will, they have been sexually assaulted, regardless of whether or not they fought back or said no. There are many reasons why a victim might not physically fight their attacker, including shock, fear, threats, or size and strength of the attacker. So we've all heard of fight or flight. There's also freeze. Um, Whatever the survivor needed to do to get through that attack is the right thing. Whether they fought back, whether it was particularly brutal or violent, whatever the survivor had to do to get through that is the right thing. And it is never their fault. Survivors exhibit a spectrum of emotional responses to assault: calm, hysteria, laughter, anger, apathy, shock. Each survivor copes with the trauma of the assault in a different way and in different ways at different times. So while maybe right after someone might be fairly calm directly after an attack, later the anger, um, the crying, the hysteria, all of that might come later. Or maybe they're hysterical directly after and they become calm. It's really very different for everybody. Everybody deals with trauma, hiccup, in a different way. So that was rape culture, victim blaming, and some facts for you. And the reason that we bring this up when we talk about media literacy is because media plays so much into how we relate to each other. So let's talk about music for a little bit. I usually start off in a classroom by asking, what kinds of messages do you get about men, women, relationships from music? It's usually pretty silent. Nobody usually says anything. So then I say, how many of you listen to rap or hip hop? I do. I like rap and hip hop. What kind of messages do you learn about women from rap and hip hop? Usually that's when the class starts to chuckle. Oh, that's what you're asking us. Yeah. So you hear the words. Now, I'm going to say a couple cuss words here. You hear the words bitch, hoe, tramp, slut. You hear a lot of those in music, not just rap and hip hop, in a lot of music. And again, this is dehumanizing someone. This is dehumanizing women in particular. Not to say that women don't do this as well. However, in a lot of music, in a lot of hip hop, rap, rock and roll, there's a lot of degrading. There's a lot of kind of taking away people's humanity. Again, making someone a commodity. For example, one of those myths was that you can't rape a prostitute. So sex workers do experience sexual assault at a much higher rate, mainly because, again, they're now a commodity. So someone paid for their time or paid for their body. Usually it's a service, and we won't go into what those services are, but so a person and a sex worker have come to an agreement, typically, not always, on what's going to happen. And then the reason that a lot of sex workers are sexually assaulted and beaten up is because people think, I paid for this. This belongs to me. I paid for this time. I can do whatever I want during this time. I paid for this person. I can do whatever I want to this person. And there's an underlying social kind of understanding that sex workers are lesser people, and they're not. They have dreams, aspirations, education, families, just like everybody else. Just like everybody else. For whatever reason, they are in sex work. Many times people are being trafficked, and we'll get into that in a different lesson. But when you make somebody a commodity for sale, what happens is they lose their humanity and they're subject to more violence because people feel that they can do whatever they want with that person. Celebrities deal with this a lot, well, like with stalkers, or, they can't go out to lunch without the paparazzi because we feel like we own them. Oh, they entertain us and we see them on TV or in movies or in magazines or in music. We own them. We get to spend time, with them when they're just trying to be normal people and run errands or whatever. So that's what we mean by media literacy. There's a lot of messages that you receive through music, through TV, movies, magazines, social media. So let's talk about social media for a little bit because there's something that we need to talk about. We need to talk about nudes. Okay. If you are under the age of 18, and I know that this is true in Washington, and I'm sure that it's true in every other state. I can't say absolutely that it's true in every other state, but I feel fairly confident. If you are under the age of 18 and you take a partially nude or fully nude photo of yourself or someone else, and send it to someone else, that's illegal. It can be considered trafficking in child pornography. So, and I get calls from schools, or I used to get calls from schools about this a lot, and talk to teachers and administrators about this a lot. About a year and a half ago, I had to, along with some other people that I volunteer with, had to do a report on a 13-year-old girl who was selling nudes on a social media site. Most people think it's easy money and it's anonymous. First of all, even if you're not selling, but you're just sending, again, it can be considered trafficking in child pornography, and it's illegal. If you're over the age of 18, it's not illegal unless you send it to someone under the age of 18. That's a whole nother mess. And if you're under 18 and you send a partially nude or fully nude photo of yourself to someone else who's under 18, it's still illegal. Sending it it's illegal. So it can be anything from a gross misdemeanor, which means you would have to talk to a judge, pay a fine, maybe go to diversion, have to do some community service, and talk to your family about it. How many people want to talk to their mom or dad or grandma about this? I don't. I wouldn't. No. And depending on the scope and your age, it can be, a Class B felony. So depending on the scope and your age, you could do some time in juvenile hall. Again, you would have to talk to a judge, pay a fine, at worst, register as a sex offender for the rest of your life. That's a life ruiner right there. Because what happens is you can say goodbye to scholarships. You can say goodbye to, it's incredibly hard to get a job because employers don't see, oh, look at that. That's a kid who made a mistake and sent nudes or whatever. What they see is sex offender, and they think this is a dangerous person that I can't have around my staff. So that's a life ruiner right there. And I would hate for that to happen to any of you. So a lot of people use Snapchat, for example. Snapchat was invented by 3 guys who went to college together. They were in a frat together for really the sole purpose of their girlfriends sending them nudes and being able to erase or delete, or they disappear fairly quickly. Whatever you put out there on the internet, someone can find. It's never gone forever. And people say, well, I'm cool because if somebody takes a screenshot in Snapchat, then I get an alert. Okay, great. Maybe you get the alert. There are apps out there that can circumvent that. You can download an app onto your tablet or phone or whatever that circumvents that. And you can take screenshots all day long that don't send anybody an alert. On the flip side of you getting in trouble, let's talk about selling nudes for a little bit, and I've heard of kids selling pictures of their feet, which I'm not going to get into a whole lot here, but I want to talk to you about the kind of people that are purchasing this content. So the people that you are selling these things to are purchasing this. Now, in about 6 to 8 clicks, I can find out a whole lot about you. I can find out where you live. I can find out where you go to school. I can find out what your interests are, and I can find out who your friends are. So if I can do that in 6 to 8 clicks, if somebody you are selling these things to decides, wow, I really like them, they're my favorite, I want to meet them, in a few clicks, they can find out where you are, and they can show up to your job or your home or your school or practice. Do you want those kinds of people who are purchasing pictures of an underage person to find you? No, you do not. You do not want that. Trust me. Trust me when I tell you don't want that. It's also a segue into, it can be a segue into trafficking. And we'll talk about trafficking. So I think next week we'll talk about bystander intervention, and then probably the week after we'll talk about trafficking. So, but we needed to talk about that because it's a big issue among teens. Stop sending partially or fully nude photos. It's illegal. And I really, really don't want to see you get in trouble. I don't want to see you get in trouble. I don't want to see you make a mistake and do something that would really have a huge effect on the rest of your life. Again, sorry about the dogs. Okay, so for the rest of the week, until I see you next Thursday, because this has gone on almost 45 minutes, so I should wrap it up. When you're watching TV, when you're playing video games, when you're looking at advertising, when you're listening to music, I want you to think about, what am I learning about men, women, relationships? Is this person being used as kind of a commodity? Is this relationship necessarily healthy? Usually at the end of this class, when I'm in a classroom, I play a couple of songs, and one of the songs that I play is Love the Way You Lie by Eminem and Rihanna. And I play it for a little bit, and then I ask the class, are these people in a healthy relationship? No, they're super codependent and violent with each other. So as you're doing this, I want you to critically think about the messages that you're getting. And are they healthy messages? Am I learning something? Social media is fantastic for learning about the world. TV is great for learning about the world. We can learn about politics, other cultures, other religions, the way other people live. We can learn so much. We can learn other languages, how to cook other kinds of food. I mean, there's just so much. And we can connect with all kinds of interesting and amazing people. Because of social media, I'm able to teach from home, which is thrilling. I love that. So there's all kinds of great stuff too. So I want you to think really critically, and I want you to leave your thoughts in the comments. So for example, hey, Sarah, my friendly neighborhood prevention specialist, I was watching this show, and the girl was really mean to the guy and really controlling. And for the first time I thought, oh man, that's abusive. That's an example. Or I was listening to the song and it was really respectful and really sweet. Great. So I want you to think about those things, and I want to hear back from you. You can do that in the comments below or on Google Classroom. And I will leave the link for Google Classroom and this lesson in the video description. And remember to subscribe to our channel. So 9th through 12th graders, I will see you next Thursday. Not at 1 o'clock. It's going to be videoed earlier and then posted. because I am very excited. I'm working with Grace Harbor Youth Work next Thursday. We're going to talk about what I do for a living and where I volunteer, so that students like you can learn about human services and like what my job in particular looks like. All right. So I had a wonderful day with you. It's been 45 minutes now. I want you to go out and have a really fantastic day. If the sun is shining where you are, take your dogs for a walk or lay in the grass in your backyard. Do something really good for you. Remember to leave those comments either here or in Google Classroom, because I can't wait to hear what you guys think about the different kinds of media that you ingest. All right. Have a great day. And remember, be kind and wash your hands. Bye-bye.